I'm doing an article today on the wreckage of Obama's legacy. Obviously, it hasn't been good, even though he insists on saying that America is better off than ever. But here's today's article. 3 days after the election, I gathered with a group of historians at Princeton for a conference about Barack Obama's presidency. The mood among the scholars who had just written papers about the underappreciated accomplishments of Obama's administration was bleak. We were discussing how quickly his programs would be dismantled now that Republicans controlled the White House and Congress. J. Trump's stunning election appeared to many to be a direct repudiation of the essential meaning of 2008 when the country elected its first African American president. Mr. Obama was a great policymaker, but not a great party builder. In the face of Republican intransigence, he still managed to get things done. But the strategies that made him successful, passing legislation by the narrowest partisan majority, refraining from boasting about what his reforms accomplished, and in the end falling back on executive orders, are exactly what make his legacy so vulnerable. Congressional Democrats frequently complained that the president's approach put them at risk. Seeking to expand government with a hidden hand, his policies were designed in such a way that made it hard for Democrats to claim credit for them. In public, he played down the scale of policies like the stimulus package so that they would not attract too much attention or criticism, whereas President Franklin D. Roosevelt made it clear that every public works project was a project of the New Deal. Americans usually had no idea what programs came from Mr. Obama's stimulus. His programs tended to be extraordinarily complex, dependent on Byzantine regulatory mechanisms rather than direct federal intervention, so they would be more palatable to moderates, rather than have the government provide health insurance for all. The Affordable Care Act created changes in mandates. The Dodd-Frank bill did not erect strong regulations to enforce reform on Wall Street, but rather a web of rules and incentives. When he couldn't win support for legislation for everything from immigration reform to reducing carbon emissions, he relied on executive orders that could, and almost certainly will, be reversed by his successor. Now Democrats are out of power, and his major policies are on the chopping block. The healthcare exchanges and the individual insurance mandate might be legislated out of existence. Mr. Trump is planning to jettison the Paris Climate Change Agreement as well as the Iran nuclear deal. And I like to say myself that Iran should have no nuclear assets whatsoever. Young immigrants will no longer be protected by deportation. Republicans could use the Congressional Review Act to knock down dozens of rules that were put in place since May, ranging from regulations guaranteeing paid sick leave to people working under federal contracts to consumer protections like the Food and Drug Administration prohibition on selling antibacterial soaps. There won't be enough votes to move forward with the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Mr. Trump's bluster on foreign policy threatens to reverse the notable improvement in diplomatic relations that took place under Mr. Obama. The Department of Justice's efforts to enforce civil rights laws and reform policing will die the slow death of regulatory neglect. The balance of power in the Supreme Court will shift back to the right. Thank God. And policies are not the only things at risk. Republicans have attacked a basic set of ideas that Mr. Obama tried to promote. With Stephen K. Bannon, someone has long appealed to anti Semites and the alt right. Serving as the president's elect's chief strategist, Mr. Trump will double down on his attacks against political correctness and social values like ethnic pluralism, and gender equality. This is all a bunch of garbage. Yet, with all of this wreckage looming on the horizon, there is a glimmer of hope that some of Mr. Obama's legacy can be salvaged. In American history, there have been a number of elections that, that seem to be a repetition of the previous president, including those of Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1952, Ronald Reagan in 1980, and Barack Obama himself in 2008. But these did not produce the full-scale reversal of programs that some observers expected. The reason is what political scientists call the process of policy feedback. When new policies are put Once new policies are put in place, they can generate strong constituencies that will defend them from attack. With with those taxes in there, no damn politician can ever scrap my Social Security program, boasted Roosevelt, anticipating the dynamics that would make elderly entitlements a third rail in American politics. Voters come to depend on benefits. Politicians are expected to protect them, and interest groups emerge that have a stake in their continuation. When this happens, a president's contributions can outlast the political coalition that created them. Eisenhower left most of the New Deal alone. The Great the Great Society the Great Society survived the Reagan Revolution, and Mr. Obama failed to wipe away George W. Bush's counterterrorism program. And I bet you remember, this is coming from me, not the article, but I bet you remember when Obama promised to take away the counterterrorism program and that he would take everybody back from war and he would end it, and none of that ever happened, along with his long list of failed promises and failed attempts at everything he did. Mr. Trump will encounter strong resistance to revoking the Medicaid coverage that 12 million Americans now enjoy under Obamacare. No, they don't enjoy it. In fact, 95% of the people out there are complaining about it. And it stands at in 2017, the rates are going to go sky high. So, I could see that this article is completely biased for Obama and even willing to lie about everything they're saying here. Numerous Republican governors, including the future Vice President Mike Pence, pushed for the expansion of the rolls. Many of Mr. Trump's own supporters probably like the benefits they have received from the ACA, even though they don't realize it. Even Dodd-Frank, hardly popular on Wall Street, could survive now that firms have adjusted to deal with the new rules. With a narrow majority in the Senate, the GOP will contend with constant obstruction as it tries to gut Mr. Obama's programs. On foreign policy, Mr. Trump's tone is far from Mr. Obama's cool demeanor, and yet he is unlikely to pull out of NATO, and his push to pressure European states in contributing more to their collective defense actually builds on statements that Mr. Obama had been making. Mr. Trump is likely to find strong pushback from Congress and the public. That is such a crock. Again, I'm going to make my own statements here. Congress is not going to push back against most of Trump's ideas, and I'm pretty sure they are going to get NATO to push out. And I don't think Congress is going to have a problem with that because we're about to go to World War III with Russia being the start of it because of Obama's actions. And not to forget, it's going to be an all Republican thing. Now, I'm not a Democrat or Republican, but this is ridiculous. I don't know. You can just see how biased that this thing is here to deny the facts. In fact, we know that Obama has acted unilaterally many times, bypassing Congress, which is illegal, because Congress Congress wouldn't deal with his crap. But it wasn't because of the color of his skin, which he claims. Anyways, the Obama years helped inspire new social activism, from Black Lives Matter, which is a mess, to the Bernie Sanders campaign. I don't know what you think of this. To me, it's just a disaster.